Football break. This is another edition of the Processing Blue podcast. This is Mike Kaye, Panthers beat reporter. I'm joined by Alex Zietlow, fellow Panthers beat reporter. Back in the States, ready to talk some bye-week football, a 2-game winning streak that has never
hold
been
up.
accomplished. Wait, before you jump in here, Alex, I want to congratulate you. You have covered a 2-game winning streak for the first time in your time as an NFL beat reporter. The energy is here, mostly because I know that I'm going to be able to crash over the next several days. But Alex, I haven't seen you in roughly a week. How the heck are you?
Okay, well, you don't need to put up this facade that we're not texting all the time and that we're not calling each other every day. Also, guys, just to put in perspective of Mike's work ethic, and I know that people don't love it when we're super saccharine on this podcast, but Mike is emailing me on a Friday at midnight my time. So my dude is up at 6 a.m. on Saturday morning grinding. And he's been, and this trip, he won't say it, so I will. This trip was just a really great showing for the Charlotte Observer, I think, and in a variety of ways. You saw him on social media. You saw him in your newsletters, which I'd love for him to open up more about his newsletters this week. His work on the website was pretty remarkable too, whether that be stuff about the game, stuff outside the game, just him exploring Germany and kind of mining his own personal past and what Germany means to him. I mean, all of it was just so beautiful. And so I want to congratulate you on a really good week of work, Mike. It was really awesome to see. And it was also cool to hold it down back here. There was just a lot of stuff going on last week. And I think we, as a tandem, did a pretty good job.
Yeah, Alex, I appreciate that. I can't do what I do without the support of you and Scott and Lydia. And first shout out for Zach. Remember, I came from the place of the sound of music. So basically I have to get some music in there. My wife being as supportive as she is, watching our kids, my mother-in-law coming in. It's not easy to lose dad for a week, and my kids were awesome. But yeah, the trip was professionally and personally one of the most fulfilling of my career. And for those that tagged along, reading newsletters or even our podcast or whatever, I appreciate your support. I know there was a lot going on that week, the election, the trade deadline, me getting a few more gray hairs, probably. The time difference was wild. I think I slept a total of 12 hours because I really wanted to immerse myself in the experience. Shout out to my guys, Moritz and Kaye, two German podcasters who are big fans of the Observer, big fans of the Panthers. Even without all the other stuff that wasn't game oriented, meeting those guys was very cool, and seeing their passion. Panthers fans overseas are very passionate and knowledgeable, and it's been very cool to kind of get to know them. Allianz Arena was phenomenal. I got to go there twice. I got to see FC Bayern Munich. I know Alex is probably going to correct me like everybody else has, but as a lifelong fan, as of 3 weeks ago, Bayern Munich is obviously my club of choice. I got an all black hat in the airport.
Oh, that's awesome.
I unfortunately, I brought Alex home a big beer stein, and I was so anxious after a 10-hour flight to get off the plane. I actually forgot it on the flight, so you can't take me anywhere. As you guys saw, I documented the Teppers and several executives, as well as Steve Smith and Jonathan Stewart going to Dachau concentration camp. I am very openly Jewish. I really embrace my culture. And that experience alone was worth the trip to me. I wrote about it in my newsletter. I wrote about Jonathan Stewart's perspective, which I found incredibly fascinating and moving. And, I think it's not political or biased to say that hate of any kind ain't it. And it's cool to see that there are people who are allied in, the opportunity to stop hate and educating themselves on other people's perspectives. I thought the way that Germany handles education on their past was second to none. I listened to a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor explain her story of triumph and tragedy, which really moved me. I talked to local Jewish students about what they're facing right now as anti-Semitism is on the rise. No matter what your political outlook on the war in the Middle East is, I mean, it's a reality for those kids who aren't even really tied to those conflicts. And so seeing the way Steve Smith and Jonathan Stewart listened, and Christy Coleman, who isn't Jewish, kind of listened and educated herself, I thought was impressive. I'm somebody who believes in education over condemnation when it comes to ignorance or just general inexperience with situations. And so I thought that was very moving and personally important. But anyway, football, that happened. I will tell you that being in the crowd in a European soccer stadium is unlike anything in America. Like, there are open air press boxes, but let me tell you something. I mean, hearing the music, hearing the sing-alongs, Sweet Caroline was played at the 2-minute warning, and I went, uh-oh, that's not a good sign. It's a victory call. It's like playing High Hopes in the middle of the fifth inning if you're a Phillies fan. But, you know, I just realized this morning as I was driving my mother-in-law to the airport that teams are undefeated if I cover them in an international setting. I was at the first ever division game in an international series game between the Jaguars and the Colts. The Jaguars won. I was in England to cover an Eagles-Jaguars game. When I was covering the Eagles, they won. And now, you know, Germany, here it is. But we got a lot to unpack. So let's get into the game itself. Oh, I should also mention MGK. He was actually really terrific live. He had a 2-song set. It was really, really well done.
Mike, if I could just say, you had just like the most flawless monologue until you talked about MGK being good. I mean, dude, come on, bro. Like that.
I thought it was pretty good. I like his pop punk stuff, and I thought Lonely Road was actually really well done there.
Well, that's so okay. Well, we're not going to go.
If he rapped, it would have gone over like a fart in church. But like, I mean, like, he did like his stuff that's actually good, if I should say. I'm not saying I'm like, banging the drum for MGK, but I thought he did a really good job for a halftime show. And so, as somebody who has watched some pretty prolific halftime shows.
Okay. All right. That's fair enough. We can settle this off air.
Yeah, we can. I should also say, I did not get up from my seat the entire game, which, as you know, having been in the press box with me for 2 years, incredibly impressive by my metrics.
Dude, weren't you cold? Like, it was freezing out there.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. It was like 35 degrees, and I did not pack well. You know, I run warm, and I was like, you know what? I'll just brave it. So I was there in a dress, I wore an undershirt, a dress shirt, and like a sports jacket, and then jeans, and that was it. And I was like, I let everybody know around me, my wife's in my phone as her first name wife. So if I freeze to death, can you just go in there? And I think just the adrenaline of a close game. And also the Panthers gave us hand warmers at one point, like the stuff that you can
Yep, the meshy thing and
like the heat pack. It was good. I was sitting between Joe Person from The Athletic and Chris Jenkins and Julian Council. And so we were like this, but we were in the crowd and we were outdoors. But anyway, let's get into this game, because enough about me.
It's never enough about you, Mike. But yeah, let's
no, but behind the scenes, it's never enough. In front of the scenes, I don't need to bore people about that. But it was an intense environment. Like, the fan base showed up and showed out. There were definitely over 1,000 traveling Panthers fans there. I thought they set the tone early. That first quarter, you couldn't have asked for a better first half, in my opinion, from both, from a complimentary standpoint. What was your biggest takeaway from the first half where they got up 10-0?
Well, the biggest takeaway was, who is this Bryce Young guy? I mean, not to be super reductive about this, but he was he was looking really confident. His feet were like looking really solid. His footwork has always been a thing. We've been talking about his footwork since literally since Dave Canales came on to the scenes this training camp, and he was looking good. He was looking decisive. He threw a couple balls that really stuck out in that first half. The first one was that crossing route to Jalen Coker, where he kind of plants his foot and steps up and throws this ball that is sort of firm, but it has to get over the inside linebacker. So it's also kind of lofted, and Jalen kind of goes up and grabs it gracefully, like he's some what's the male version of a ballerina? I don't know. It was just like this magnificent
ballerina. I don't know. I'm the wrong person.
Well, it was just this magnificent feat of athleticism, and it was like, oh wow, okay, a second-year quarterback in Bryce Young, who was the #1 overall pick, who a lot of people cast out a couple weeks ago,
including Alex,
threw this ball to this undrafted free agent rookie, and it was like this moment of, oh wow, this could work. Also, that first half, Chuba Hubbard dominated. I know we're going to talk more about Chuba later in this episode, but I mean, this offensive line was doing a whole bunch of great things, whether it was Damian Lewis getting a great push on the left side, Robert Hunt pulling and breaking free some really big runs. It was great. Chuba was able to run outside as well. That's not really his thing. His thing is running between the tackles and between the hash marks and turning a 3-yard run into a 6-yard gain. But he was breaking them out free, big time. The offense just looked explosive and competent. And honestly, when I think about it, the fact that they only scored 10 points in the first half is kind of weird. It's okay, well, this offense was running so good and this defense was playing so well, and even causing turnovers, and the Panthers could only figure out score one touchdown. In retrospect, it's a little concerning, but in the moment, it was okay, great. This offense is pretty good. Mike, what do you think about the first half? And then I also want you to talk about Bryce in a second.
Yeah, I think defensively, it seemed like everybody was tackling to the ball, but let's talk about DJ Wonnum for a second, because you really documented how he had a lot to come back from. Surgery, another surgery, MRSA, blood clot. It was a tough road, and he played like he was shot out of a cannon. I tweeted at one point, I said, he is getting around the edge so efficiently that he is going to get home in a matter of time. And I think it was maybe a handful of plays later, they tried that flea flicker on 3rd down, and he just engulfed, Daniel Jones like he was a dragon from Game of Thrones. It was that was a hit that was felt towards the sideline, because I'll tell you, the Panthers went nuts. What I think is important when you identify culture is the way guys feel about everybody around them, and the way that they celebrated Wonnum's triumph there. I think that set the tone for everything. Everything. I'm not talking just defense. I'm saying, yes, Bryce scoring the touchdown. I actually called the route, as you know, I tend to do. I said, hey, this is going to be Jatavian Sanders on a crosser. And while there had to be a little bit of adjustment because of pressure, he was clearly the first read. There was no question he was the first read. And I think they called a very good first half. I do think it got kind of, flustered in the second half as the defense kind of wore down a little bit. But I do think in general, I think Evero and Canales deserve a lot of credit. The special teams is kind of up and down, but I think overall, I think Johnny Hecker and Eddie Pinheiro were nails for the most part. I think this team is going to have to win dirty like this, right? They've only won games where they've held teams to 22 points or less. And look, they've gone up. Look, let's put this in reality. The Raiders, Giants, and Saints are all miserable right now.
Bad teams.
All teams with 3 wins or less. And so I think you have to put that into perspective. But I thought operationally in the first half, this team looked absolutely legitimate. And then I think you get into the second half where the Giants score outscore the Panthers 17-10. And look, I think there are people that have said like this defense isn't built to play from behind. Well, they're really not built with a lead either, but I do think they made some, obviously turnovers made the difference, right? Like Josie Jewell gets one of the most insane interceptions I've ever seen. And I know people were comparing it to the week before when Xavier Legette had the ball stripped from, no, I thought there was absolutely no way this was an interception. It basically fell on him. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, right? And so Josie's had kind of a rough stretch here. Injured throughout, like didn't play very well in the first month of the season. He came up big. A'Shawn Robinson has really come on the past few weeks, forced a fumble that basically clinched the game. Daniel Jones is terrible. I know there are probably some people that are from Charlotte that have connections to him. I texted a few people. I said, it's going to be a hell of a Disney story when he becomes the next Taysom Hill in 2 years, because I just don't know how you can be successful with him throwing the football regularly.
Yeah.
He's such a great runner, and he's a great athlete. He's just, I mean, the NFL level of passing is just not there. He did have a moment where he basically targeted J.C. Horn consistently because J.C. Horn was playing off and they were playing in prevent, which is not something they're accustomed to doing. And so, well, I guess they outscored him 17-3 in the second half, excuse me. Or no, 17-7.
7. Yep.
Excuse me. Listen, Chuba Hubbard, they paid the right guy. I've never seen in my career a guy respond to getting a contract extension in the middle of the season the way that guy did. He is the new face of the franchise right now. I know people are going to get up in their, you know, they're going to clutch their pearls about paying another running back and investing all this stuff in Jonathan Brooks, but like he does everything the right way. He is the best culture guy on the team. He deserves a captaincy in the second half of the season. There's no question about that. And that's something they should really look into. He is a guy that everybody looks to as a work ethic, as a performer. He always keeps his head down. He doesn't have a ton to say. Dave Canales even said to us, he said, he's the guy that like, I can't think of anybody who embolizes what we are looking for, like Chuba Hubbard. And I think it became clear to you and me very early on in the season that this guy was a wagon that they should attach themselves to. I don't think either one of us had an issue with that contract, which by the way, he's getting like the 9th best APY of a running back. And it's going to look even better when a bunch of guys get paid next year. He is, I mean, like, I'm not a huge guy on like the, oh my gosh, culture, blah, 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 blah. But Chuba Hubbard is nails when it comes to that. And I think you couldn't have paid a better guy because he gets it. He's not selfish. He's not self-centered. He isn't a guy who puts up a stink over dumb things. He's not a guy who causes trouble off the field. And all he does is progress and produce. And I think, you know, kudos to Dave Canales, to Dan Morgan, to Brent Tillis, to Scott Cooper, to the entire leadership team that recognized that early, said it doesn't matter what position he plays, dude is a horse. And, you know, they're going to ride that train or horse until the wheels fall off. And I think that's a positive outlook for everybody. That's a good look for J.C. Horn. That's a good look for Brady Christensen. That's a good look for some of these other guys who have contracts coming up and are homegrown who want to be here long term, and they do.
Absolutely. And Mike, just one quick thing on the Chuba Hubbard subject. I'm fascinated by the fact, or by the prospects of we're having a very different conversation if in the second half Chuba gets tackled from behind, whether it's a horse collar or not is up for debate, on a slower surface than normal, and his leg bends super weird and his knee, according to him, literally dislocated and before getting popped back in, but he can't return to the game. And now he has a multi-week injury to return from. Like it seems, I mean, obviously we're both on the same page when it comes to that contract should have been, the contract was well executed and it was really great for both the player and the team at this point in the team's building process. However, I'm just curious how our conversation would have shifted, because as we've said all year, a lot of general managers don't like to give big contracts to running backs, particularly running backs who have taken the beatings that Chuba has. Although Chuba didn't. That's another fascinating point about all this is really the first year that Chuba's been RB1 starting the year.
Mm-hmm.
Previous to that, he was playing behind Christian McCaffrey, obviously, and then right after Christian was Miles Sanders was brought in on a pretty lucrative deal. And so I would understand how if Panthers fans would be a bit traumatized by, okay, we're paying a running back a lot of money.
Sure.
Again,
that would have been a freak occurrence too on a right. Hybrid field. As you and I have well documented the issue with grass versus turf. And listen, Dave Canales said Monday that there were several factors in not playing Jonathan Brooks. To me, I brought this up before the game. I brought it up before all that stuff. You and I have talked about it on the podcast, I believe, last week. I didn't feel comfortable playing a guy who hadn't played in almost a year on a foreign surface that you really didn't get to test out beforehand. Made very little sense to me. And we saw Miles Sanders get injured with a lower leg injury. We saw Ian Thomas go down with a lower leg injury. And those guys have a history of lower leg injuries. So to put a guy who has a knee injury out there didn't make a lot of sense. Oh, and by the way, they didn't really need him because Chuba Hubbard is a wagon and had a career high. He had 3 runs of over 25 yards, which isn't really necessarily, as you said, his game, but his ability to consistently make plays is phenomenal. Let's talk about Bryce a little bit, though. I mean, we need to move on, but he made some of the worst throws he's ever made, and also some of the best throws that he's ever made in the second half / overtime. Right? Mm-hmm. There was that one that was super high to Chuba Hubbard in the flat and basically stalled all their momentum in that final drive. But prior to that, I think it was prior to that, he hit Xavier Legette on probably the most clutch dime throw to the sideline that he's made in his entire career. Incredibly impressed by that throw. It did seem kind of like the gas kind of came out of the tank there in that second half, but they did run the ball quite a bit and they were playing with a lead. I think this team has to learn how to play with a lead because it's just taken so long to get there. And I think that was part of the the issue, right, with this team, is they really haven't played with a lead very often over the last 2 years. And when you have all these young guys who aren't used to it and you're riding the Chuba train, by the way, shout out to Robert Hunt, Cade Mays, Damian Lewis, Taylor Moton, Brady Christensen. The work they have done during this 2-game winning streak should, be in a museum. Like, it's really tough to shift offensive line, especially when you're moving one guy from center to left tackle. Your center was on another practice squad a month ago. Like, this is a unique situation. I also think it speaks to Joe Gilbert, Harold Goodwin, Khalili. I cannot pronounce his last name. I apologize because I also don't have it in front of me. But their entire 3-man weave of an offensive line coaching staff deserves a ton of credit. So does Brady Christensen. So does Cade Mays. But that's part of what allowed Chuba Hubbard to eat. And then, defensively, I texted you, I think, and a few other people, and I go, oh, so this is the Dan Morgan offseason game. This is what this will be known as. Because, if you really think about it, Xavier Legette was great in the first half. So was Jalen Coker. It's clear that they're tired. They're getting overloaded with work and routes and everything. David Moore looked good. He made a couple of really important plays. Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis, Josie Jewell, who has a background with Evero. Ashawn Robinson.
DJ Wanham, obviously.
DJ Wanham, it was a good overall showing for the front office, and then I also think for the coaching staff in most moments. So anyway, they win on an Eddie Pinheiro field goal in overtime, as one does, off the turnover from Ashawn Robinson and Josie Jewell. It was very cold in that stadium. They were stoked. They changed in literally the smallest locker room I've ever seen. I was told that some players were forced to be outside the locker room when they were like having their victory thing because it was just so small. It's like it looked like basically the size. Each locker room is split up, and each locker room is about the size of the studio you're in right now. Maybe a little bit bigger than my kid's room that I'm in right now because he's home from school. But
that's remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, it was impressive. Everybody was pumped. I appreciated the way that Chuba Hubbard answered questions afterwards because he was getting a lot of love and he remained humble, post game. And I think it was just very cool to see how genuinely appreciative Deshaun Williams, JC Horn, Jordan Fuller were for DJ Wanham, and all those guys have gone through their own struggles, so they could kind of appreciate it. We've kind of documented all three of their struggles, right? Like, so moving on, I kind of wanted to talk about, I know we spent a lot of time on the game, and this is probably going to be a little bit longer than the normal podcast, but I wanted to talk about, our outlook on Evero and Young. Those are the two kind of most polarizing dudes right now because of the first half. But coming off this 2-game winning streak, I'm just curious, has your opinion on Young changed at all?
It is important for me as a journalist to stick to what I have thought in a loss as well as in a win, particularly when, as I've said a couple times on this podcast, seasonal success isn't the priority for the Panthers. Right. That said, my outlook has changed slightly. Among the reasons why, his wide receiver room now, I'm talking about Bryce Young here, his wide receiver room is looking kind of good, or good as a stretch.
There's upside, right?
There is upside for thank you. There's upside for this wide receiver room in the second half of the year. You got Adam Thielen coming back as he just got activated up to the 53-man roster on Tuesday afternoon. You got Xavier Legette looking like the rookie wide receiver that the Panthers traded up for in the first round for. You got Jalen Coker, who we've talked about him a ton, but he is playing up to his potential. His athleticism is showing every week. You talk to the coaches, he's a guy who makes the right football play every time. And then you got David Moore, who really truly was a factor in Germany.
He's been a factor the last 2 weeks, to be honest with you.
Yeah, there was the play. He caught a touchdown pass that they ruled back in Germany, but he made a really important third down catch. I think it was 3rd and 9 while the Panthers were in the red zone that set up the Chuba Hubbard touchdown. And that's a veteran catch. That's not a play where he shook the his cornerback loose or whatever. He just the ball was, 5 yards from his face before even seeing the ball, and it hit him in the hands and he held on to it. And that paved the way for what turned out to be a really important score. So David Moore's looking good. All 4 of those guys are pretty good. And
if I could add to that, we learned something in London that David Moore sprained his MCL very early on in the season, did not miss a practice or a game, and basically set the example for other players to see, look, you're going to have bumps and bruises, but we're going to play. I actually think he is low key the leader, the co-leader in that wide receiver room, along with Adam Thielen. And I think he's who's helped the young guys really excel. But go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, and then you continue on with the playmakers that are potentially coming back. Firstly, Miles Sanders, the latest that we've heard from him is that he has an ankle injury. He got carted off the field in Germany against the Giants. I think it was late in the first half. We don't know what his status is as of right now, but you do have a healthy-ish Chuba Hubbard, so long as everything is all good with that knee. And then you got Jonathan Brooks coming back, or not even coming back, making his NFL debut, presumably Week 12 against the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, with these playmakers playing well, with this offensive line being among the best pass protection groups in the league, with a running game that is really quite good. I mean, particularly with Chuba Hubbard like commanding it. Things are looking up, and if I don't think it's fair to ask the defense to make 3 turnovers, 2 of which were in the red zone, 1 of which was in overtime on the first play of overtime that basically didn't force the offense to do anything to get the game-winning field goal. I mean, that's the one bad part about this Germany game, which is if the score was a little different, we could be having a very different conversation right now. But the score wasn't different. Bryce has managed 2 back-to-back wins with the plum. And yes, he wasn't the difference in those wins, but he managed them. I said when he got the starting job back before Denver, I said that he needed to win 5 games and at minimum 5 games as a starter. And he needed to prove that he was a weapon, kind of like he was in Christmas Eve 2023, to make it work, to make the Panthers reconsider, okay, he could be our guy for 2025. There's still a long way to go with that, but he's come a decent way in that time. So my outlook has slightly changed. If you had to ask me right now, do you think Bryce Young is going to be the starting quarterback in 2025 for the Carolina Panthers? I'm still going to say no. I still think that if everything is equal right now, the Panthers are going to find a way to deal him, and his capital as an asset has gone up remarkably the past 2 weeks. But things are looking good, and the Panthers have the second half of the season to kind of build on what he's done so far.
Yeah, so I want to wrap this up, but I want to kind of, because my laptop is dying for some reason. I accidentally recorded in the other room. But so let me go into Evero before we send it off. But I think something that I've made kind of light of is the fact that Evero has essentially become the deputy director of pro scouting for defense, bringing in a bunch of guys that he knows. But frankly, the guys that he knows stepped up for him big time in Munich. And I think that speaks to the culture and the scheme that he is trying to create. I think A'Shawn Robinson, Josie Jewell, Jordan Fuller, the run defense looked much better with Jordan Fuller in the game. I thought, Wadham played well. Obviously, he wasn't a guy that had a connection to him, but Minnesota has a very comparable defense. Clowney played well. Overall, I thought it was just a good showing, and we've seen the defense kind of respond of late. I think they're tackling better. I think that they are a much more aware unit right now. It's taken a while. I mean, I don't think it's a great reflection of him, but I do think the talent on that side of the ball came in pretty paper thin. They're also missing their best player and Derek Brown. They've had a ton of injuries. So maybe we should give him a little grace there. But I think Evero is still a talented defensive play caller. I think he's a really good influence on the locker room. We'll see where it ends up for the rest of the way. But I think he's set up for them to be successful, especially with a lot of guys back in the fold who are actually talented, right? It's one thing to have bodies. It's another thing to have talented bodies around on defense. And speaking of talented bodies, let's just we were going to do a bigger segment on this, but I think you and I both have some guys we want to shout out at the midway point. Alex, who is your rookie, your offensive player, and your defensive player at the midway point?
Rookie of the year, Trevin Wallace, our guy.
Yeah, we've been on the Trevin Wallace train for quite some time.
He's third in the team in tackles. And he has taken over the Shaq Thompson role with the plum, I think. Offensive player of the year, this could go to 2 players.
Of the midway.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, excuse me. This could go to 2 players. I'm going to roll with Robert Hunt. I could also see giving it to Damian Lewis or like giving them like a tandem sort of thing. But like the way that they have just transformed this offense is remarkable. And then defensive player of the year, I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit. I'm going to roll with A'Shawn Robinson. He just came off, perhaps his recency bias, he just came off his best game of the year, but he's tied for the team lead in sacks. And that's pretty tough to do as an interior defensive lineman. Made the game-changing play last week to pave the way for one of the Panthers' 3 wins. So to recap, rookie of the halfway point, Trevin Wallace, offensive player of the halfway point, Robert Hunt, and defensive player of the halfway point, A'Shawn Robinson. What about you, Mike?
Well, since I don't want to be yelled at by Zach, I'm going to do this like Ace Ventura really fast, like as he breaks down a crime scene. I can talk. So rookie, I'm going to give it to Xavier Legette. He was a guy that I was kind of skeptical of early on, but I think he's really shown out. He's got 4 touchdowns, which is more touchdowns for a rookie than even, DJ Moore had at wide receiver. I think he's done a really good job of coming as advertised as a big target over the middle. I think he and Bryce are really establishing themselves as a young tandem, and I like the work that he's doing. He's, in my mind, he's the runaway guy from that standpoint. Offensive, Chuba Hubbard. We've said a ton about him.
Yep.
But they paid the right guy. They paid the right guy. Period. There's no way that I'm coming off of that. They paid the right guy. Injury or whatever. I think he's the example that they want. Every time they talk about wanting something from leadership or culture, he checks a box. Defensively, I'm going to give it to JC Horn. I think JC has done a really nice job. Every cornerback gets beat, but I think he has done an exponentially better job than any corner you could think of when it comes to run defense. He's been durable. He's played in all 10 games. He's tackled well. He's played the run exceptionally well for a cornerback. He's become a leader as well. The stuff that he did in Denver, I thought actually kind of helped in the next couple of weeks of there's the fire. And they've responded to that defensively. So to recap, Xavier Legette, Chuba Hubbard, JC Horn, those are my Midway awards. Alex, break us on down because I have 10 minutes left on this laptop.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Man, I really should have learned this in German and done this in German. Anyway, okay, we're moving on. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Stay humble, stay creative, and Mike Kaye, keep processing.
That's a wrap, Zach.